Hey there, focused learners, and welcome to This Explainer. Now, consider me your highly rigorous tutor today. See, I'm the kind of expert who absolutely loves to double-check things. I'm naturally skeptical, I dive deep into my research, and look, frankly, I'm not always right. But hey, neither are you. But together, we're going to strive for 100% accuracy, because that is exactly what you need to ace an exam. So today, we're doing a meticulously double-checked, completely no-fluff review of the first 27 pages of your entrepreneurship and project development PDF. I've distilled this whole thing down to make it super easy to understand, but I wouldn't dare miss a single testable concept. Let's dive right in. Okay, here's your ultimate study roadmap. We're covering 1. Defining the entrepreneur. 2. Traits, roles, and risks. 3. Managers versus entrepreneurs. 4. The mechanics of motivation, and finally, 5, the essential competencies. Let's hit it.
Section 1. Defining the entrepreneur.
All right, let's start with the absolute basics here. Knowing the exact etymology is, well, it's exactly the kind of foundational detail that examiners just love to test. If we double-check the historical record, the evolution of this word is actually pretty fascinating. The term derives from the French word entreprendre. Initially, it just designated an organizer of musical entertainments. Kind of wild, right? Then, by the 16th century, it was being used for army leaders. Move into the 17th century, and it expanded to cover civil engineering and construction. But the absolutely crucial shift, the one you literally need to know for your exam, happens in the 18th century. A guy named Richard Cantillon, an Irishman living in France, was the very first to rigorously apply the term to economic activities. Burn that name into your memory, okay? Richard Cantillon. Moving on to Section 2, Traits, Roles, and Academic Perspectives. Now, you might think everyone agrees on what an entrepreneur actually does, right? Well, as a natural skeptic, I can tell you for a fact that the academic heavyweights completely disagree on their primary function. So let's break down the 3 major camps you need to know for the test. First up is our guy, Richard Cantillon. He defines the entrepreneur's core role as a risk bearer. Essentially, an entrepreneur buys factor services at certain, fixed prices to sell a product at completely uncertain prices in the future. The massive keyword you need to memorize here is uncertainty. If you see Cantillon on the exam, boom, you must immediately think of the risk bearer who deals with non-insurable risks. You just can't buy insurance against market uncertainty, and Cantillon knew that perfectly well. Let's double-check this against our second heavyweight, J. Baptist Say. Now, Say views the entrepreneur very differently. He doesn't just see a risk-taker, he sees the ultimate organizer. To him, the entrepreneur is the specific person coordinating the land of one person, the labor of another, and the capital of yet another, all to produce a final product. For your exam, remember this key distinction. Say deliberately separates the capitalist, the person who merely funds the operation, from the entrepreneur who actually builds and supervises the whole shebang. And that brings us to our third viewpoint from Joseph A. Schumpeter, formulated way back in 1934. Schumpeter argues the core role is literally the innovator. For him, the entrepreneur is this highly dynamic agent of change. They aren't just organizing existing things, no, they introduce totally new combinations. We're talking new products, new methods of production, opening brand new markets, or finding entirely new sources of raw materials. Just think of the very first person to slap a high-quality camera onto a mobile phone. That completely opened up a new market. So let's review those notes quickly. Cantillon is the risk bearer, Say is the organizer, and Schumpeter is the innovator. Got it? All right, Section 3, Manager versus Entrepreneur Role Comparisons. Listen, exams absolutely love comparisons. They love testing if you can differentiate between 2 highly similar concepts. So let's meticulously contrast the entrepreneur with a standard manager. Look at the stark differences here. An entrepreneur's motive? It's personal gratification to start a brand new venture. A manager's motive is simply to render services in an enterprise that's already been set up by somebody else. What about status? The entrepreneur is the owner, full stop. The manager is functionally the servant of the organization, but the absolute most critical exam point is risk and reward. The entrepreneur assumes non-insurable risk for highly uncertain profits. The manager, they bear zero risk and get a fixed, certain salary. One of them innovates, the other simply executes.
Now let's see how this all builds into the concept of the intrapreneur. This is a much newer breed of innovator. Intrapreneurs are basically top executives innovating inside large, established organizations. They do the innovative work of an entrepreneur, catching hold of brilliant new ideas and converting them into actual products. But they do it all within the super safe, cozy framework of corporate research and development. They don't have to raise their own funds, they don't bear the full risk, and they get a variety of nice, safe corporate perks. In short, they are dependent, whereas the true entrepreneur operates entirely independently.
Okay, section 4, the mechanics of motivation. Basically, what drives them.
So what actually drives someone to take on all this independent risk instead of just taking a safe manager's salary? Well, we have to look at Dalton E. McFarland's definition. Motivation is basically the way our urges, drives, or desires direct our behavior. You need to break this down into 3 highly testable steps for the exam. Step 1 is the motive. That's your inner state of mind. That inner state activates step 2, your behavior, or your action. And then that action is directed entirely towards step 3, achieving a specific goal. It goes motive to behavior to goal. Super simple, but very important.
But what exactly are those specific inner motives? Well, first, we absolutely have to look at Maslow's classic hierarchy of needs. Think of it like a giant mountain of stepping stones. Down at the very bottom, you have your basic physiological needs: food, shelter, mere survival. Once those are secured, you move up to safety and security needs, then your social needs, then esteem and status. Finally, at the very peak of the mountain, you reach self-actualization. Remember, an entrepreneur is a human being first. They're motivated by economic rewards just to meet those baseline physiological and safety needs well before they can even think about scaling the rest of the pyramid.
However, do not, and I mean do not, confuse Maslow with David McClelland on your test. McClelland states that we acquire 3 specific needs through our life experiences: the need for achievement, the need for power, and the need for affiliation. The absolutely critical one for entrepreneurs is the need for achievement. High achievers are these deeply internally driven self-starters, and pay very close attention here. High achievers are motivated by calculated risk-taking. As someone who double-checks everything myself, I deeply respect this. They examine all the odds to get them in their favor. They absolutely do not take blind, foolish risks. Bringing us to our final section, Section 5, Essential Competencies, the 12 PECs.
Let's break down these personal entrepreneurial competencies, also known as the PECs, into nice bite-sized chunks for your memory banks. We're going to group this first set around pure action and vision. Number 1 is initiative. This means doing things before being asked or forced to by a crisis. Number 2, they actively see and act on opportunities. And number 3 is persistence. They take action even in the face of massive obstacles. They don't just have a lofty vision, they stubbornly push right through the market's trickiest hurdles and simply refuse to take no for an answer. Now, let's group the second set around brain power and strategy, which honestly are my personal favorites. This includes information seeking, which means doing rigorous personal research and actually consulting experts. It also involves systematic planning. That's the ability to take a massive, overwhelming goal and logically break it down into manageable little subtasks. And finally, problem solving, identifying new, potentially totally unique workarounds to reach a goal or overcome a sudden challenge. Finally, this last set revolves around interpersonal skills and sheer drive. You're going to need self-confidence, which is an unshakable belief in your own abilities to complete a task. You must also possess assertiveness. That means you directly confront problems and issues with others, even if it means reprimanding people who fail to perform their duties. And lastly, persuasion. Having the actual charm to convince others to buy your product, to provide financing, and to just fundamentally buy into your overall vision. So as we wrap up this completely meticulous review of your first 27 pages, I want to leave you with a question. You know the theory now. You know Cantillion's risk bearer, Say's organizer, and Schumpeter's innovator. But do you actually possess the personal entrepreneurial competencies to do it yourself? Evaluating yourself against these exact competencies is step 1. So study these definitions, double-check your facts, and approach your upcoming exam with the exact same calculated risk we just talked about. Best of luck on the test. I really hope you're ready to master your own journey.